It's time to get down to business on TK Business Live, brought to you by the members of the Topeka Independent Business Association. Now, let's join Tara Dimmick, owner and publisher of TK Business Magazine, as we take a look into the business world of Topeka, Kansas.
Hi, and welcome to TK Business Live. I'm Tara Dimmick, and it is great to be with you. This week has been a busy, packed-filled week for TK as we've launched the TK Business Magazine. The summer issue is out on stands and online. You can check it out at tkmagazine.com. We've had to restock all the racks a couple times now, and so we know it's going fast, and we're about out of magazines. So be sure, if you're looking for a print copy, that you run by any of our partners. You can pick up at some of our rack locations. We have one at Fairlawn Plaza Mall, one at Westridge Mall. Actually, we have 4 at Westridge Mall. And Dillon's and Hy-Vee usually have them as well. So go pick up a print copy, or again, check it out at tkmagazine.com. So each issue of the magazine, I get to do a publisher page, and I always love doing it. It never, rarely ever has anything to do with what's actually in the magazine. It usually has something to do with a story that I want to share to the rest of the world about business and kind of how the infusion of business and life can consistently come at each other. And the most recent one we did, the summer issue, was a look at my husband, the poor guy. It's never necessarily a good thing to get in the way of my publisher page, but he recently took up motocross. And so if you read the publisher page, you know this, but I wanted to share with you as well. But he recently took up motocross this year. He's never done it before. Never. I mean, he's ridden a dirt bike. He had a dirt bike as a kid. But he's never raced or anything. And so he took up motocross, and, he's not old by any means, but he's no young pup either. And, maybe it's a midlife crisis. I'm not going to not admit to that, but it's really been, inspiring to watch him be willing to do something that he enjoys, which is the dirt bike riding. He enjoys the dirt bike, but then take it to the next level to say, I want to do something with this. And I want to not just be living every day going to work and not be living outside of work. And when really working himself to try to figure out what work-life balance looks like for him. And, the things that aren't in the publisher page is it's caused him to need to work out and get in better shape so that he's more physically fit to handle the race. He does, I can never remember what they're called, but they're 2-hour-long races. And so he has to be physically in very good shape to be able to handle the 2-hour race and the stress and strength that it requires to get through those 2 hours. So, it made me question, even myself. I am a workaholic. I love working, and I always say that. But then it made me really start thinking about, am I doing anything outside of work that really gets me excited about life? And, my kids do, and my family does. And I have all these things that I can always say, and I genuinely feel. But it has made me put that in perspective of what am I doing to increase my competitive side? What am I doing to try something new? So I encourage you to go try something you kind of were thinking was maybe outside the box. Maybe something you were like, I'm not really sure if I want to do that. But God, that looks cool. What can you do to actually get to the steps that lets you go and try that class or try that crazy thing that you've always wanted to do, but maybe something's held you back from doing it? So we've got a great show coming up. I've got Kristina Dietrick joining me just shortly to talk about some regulations that you need to be aware of. And then Greg Winkler will be joining us later in the show to talk about Azura Credit Union and the recent merger with Educational Credit Union and Quest Credit Union to create Azura. Kristina Dietrick is joining me. She is the president and owner of Creative Business Solutions. Welcome, Kristina.
Hello.
Always great to have you. And I always love what we get to talk about because it's always interesting to talk about these human resource issues. Mm-hmm. Because whether it is a business owner or even the employees, everybody's dealing with people.
Absolutely. So, if you have one person on staff, you're dealing with the people issue.
Yeah, it's just constant. So, okay, so recently in TK Business Magazine, you were an expert for us in the summer issue, and we were talking about the new regulation that businesses need to be looking at, preparing for. So just give me the skinny on this.
Absolutely. It's honestly, You can tell that, legislators as well as lawyers put this regulation together. It's not a concise type of, regulation. In fact, when we first got it from our sources, it was on over 500 pages in length.
This regulation
Correct.
was 500.
Correct. So just FYI, we tried to put it down in a condensed version. But what seems to be the most highlighted is the threshold for an exempt employee has risen, and it's affecting a lot of businesses that we partner with. So, for example, it used to be a minimum salary level of $455, per week, and it has risen, meaning the threshold of the minimum is to now $970 per week. So if someone is within your organization and is making roughly $45,000, $46,000, $47,000, per year or less and is exempt, now they're eligible for overtime. So not knowing everybody's business and how much these folks are working overtime or not, what we're asking people to do is heads up. This is going to be in effect at the end of this year, supposedly December 1st. And if you have people in that category, you need to start making some decisions at that time in regards to recording their time and paying them appropriately.
So when we first heard about this regulation, I've talked to a couple businesses, and their first reaction was like, what the heck? This isn't okay. What are they doing regulating us again? But then once they dug in, they realized they really didn't necessarily have the situation. So where did this come from?
For the most part, it was industry based. There are certain industries that were categorizing people of exempt status and a supervisory status, and then working them a ton of overtime. So it got into, the form of legislation to pay them appropriately. So I'm afraid, for the most part, it was the retail and the fast food industry where they were over multiple locations and they had maybe 10, 15 people underneath them. They're an exempt employee making $40,000 a year and then probably on average working 5, 10, 15 hours of overtime. So I understand why this need to be looked at, but it's just like with any legal change. Sometimes we try to fix one problem and it creates problems for others. So that's why we tell people to analyze it. Most of the folks that we represent, they're professional level staff that are making less than that. The great majority are not working overtime. So you may not see a change at all.
So I think there's a lot that are like that. I've had employees that are like that are exempt. They would have been under the threshold just based off of what our work area was and what their level was, but they were still exempt. But I never had them keep track of hours or anything like that. I don't think they would have ever worked overtime. Maybe 1 week or something like that, they would have hit the overtime. How do we now have to, which is, I got to tell you, the benefit of a salary person in my mind is that I don't have to have them keep track of their hours.
Absolutely.
We can take that off of the list. I don't have to care whether they get there at a certain time, as long as they get in the range and as long as they leave in the range, we're good. So do they now have to be clocking in and clocking out and doing that work?
Technically, yes. And what's going to be a challenge in regards to that is whether or not you do that electronically or whether or not you just do that in paper format. Honestly, with the smaller operations, just like our operation, we're less than 15 employees. If I had to enact something like this, we already have a time tracking electronic, mechanism to use. This is FYI, small business owners. It's off of QuickBooks system. It's called Intuit. It's Time Tracker. So it's very easy to administer to non-exempt and exempt employees. It's a wonderful mechanism. And in fact, you can even administer it through your Outlook. So it's even better than that. But I have that electronic capability. But if you didn't, it's as simple as just having a timesheet and, basically recording it as such. They came in at 8, they left at 5, and they did that Monday through Friday, and you sign off on it. The reason as an employer you need to start protecting yourself, everything is hunky-dory. Everything seems hunky-dory until someone complains. And that's what is my biggest concern about this law. Is much of the employment law that we deal with is really under the radar of the general population. But this has been very, very, very well exposed within national, state, local media. Even our local Chamber of Commerce has, given a shout out to the business owners. So, I mean, the general population is very familiar with this. So that's what I see is if the general population is aware of it, they're going to challenge it. So if you're not doing what you need to do as a business owner, don't be surprised if one of your folks who feels like they should be in a different category or paid for overtime or whatever that is, they're probably going to be making a complaint with the Department of Labor.
Or even just as simple as they now know the opportunity is there for them
Correct.
to make a complaint. Where
Absolutely.
before it was just a simple,
Yes.
you go your salary, so you now know you might work a few nights late.
Yes.
So it's very interesting.
And I will say, just like with many audits that we deal with, and particularly a Department of Labor audit, it doesn't happen just to happen. A complaint has been made. Either a current employee or a former employee walks down to the Department of Labor and makes their complaint. If they make their complaint, they are going to investigate it. As I, tell folks, my business owners, one thing I've learned about being in HR for 25 years and also administering payroll for 8 years is people track their money. I always tell people, don't mess with people's money, because once you fight over a nickel, they know that they can go down to that Department of Labor and make a complaint. It will be investigated. And if you go through an audit process, which usually happens, unless, you can figure it out through a mediation process, they will come out to your place of business and look at your documentation and make an assessment and go back so many years to make sure that they're paid appropriately. Now, since this is effective December 1st, and we're talking about this new regulation, if they made the complaint in March, they probably would only go back to December 1st, if that, makes sense. They're not going to go the normal 2 years back. But this segues into my next thing to put on your list of things to do, business owners, is get your job descriptions up to date. Because if the Department of Labor does come in, that's the first thing they're going to look at. They're going to look at the job description. And there's a resource on the Department of Labor website, and it's basically the FLSA checklist to see if they're exempt or non-exempt. Take the extra few minutes to go through that checklist to basically prove your point that based upon the job description, they are an exempt employee. I always tell my business owners the job description, a lot of the heavy lifting that you need to get done, you just need to make sure those essential job functions are there, just because not only for FLSA, but also for ADA, meaning accommodations. I can't tell, you how many times I have situations that happen in life. Like, for example, I've dealt with multiple motorcycle accidents here recently with the partners that I work with, and they're going to be off work for a while. They have to heal. They have to get better. But the challenge is, can they come back and do the either physical or mental components of the essential job functions? And if you don't have that job description, it's hard to prove.
So go back through just really quick on this new regulations coming down from FLSA. FLSA.
That's right. Yeah, another acronym.
Another acronym.
That's right.
What is that for?
It's Fair Labor Standards Act.
Okay, so what should a business do? What is just steps? Do these 3 or 4 things, and they'll be at least in the right direction.
Well, in fact, in the most recent TK Magazine article, we kind of bulleted out these are the things that you need to do, and honestly, you need to do some analysis of your current compensation of your, employee base. You need to know who is exempt and non-exempt, and if they're less than this threshold, then you need to make some decisions on whether or not to pay the same salary, but also pay overtime. So that's option number 1. Also, you can pay the employee on an hourly wage plus overtime. A lot of what is happening out there in the legal world is you can switch them to non-exempt. You can say that they're non-exempt and you'll pay overtime with them as well, too. But there's always this stigma, going from salary to hourly. And there's a lot of literature out there, and it's going to be on our blog next week about how to communicate this appropriately to staff. But that's a business decision. You have to basically make the decision, okay, I'm going to keep them at salary, but just pay them overtime, or I'm going to put them back in an hourly status at the same rate, but pay them overtime. Also, this is my least popular, is reduce the employee salary to account for anticipated overtime. The reason I don't like this is because that's a bummer.
Well, and it goes back to your statement about don't mess with my money.
Well, and on top of that, not only don't mess with my money, but you don't really probably have very good data to justify reducing their salary for the, amount of overtime that they're going to have in the future. So maybe that's something that you do not now, but possibly later after you get data.
Yeah, or even with a new hire.
Absolutely.
To understand, okay, we know that this position actually does this.
Correct. So that's one thing. And then also utilize an alternative compensation plan that includes payment of overtime. That can mean a multitude of different ways, but really the top two are the ones that I would focus in on first. People always ask me, is this really, really, really going to happen? And you know what? Yes, I think it's really, really, really going to happen. But I will say, I don't know if you've noticed, Tara, a lot is happening on the presidential level, campaign trail. And we are going to have changes, within our government structure, meaning different representatives. So there always is a possibility that this could be tweaked in some way. But right now, I just would not bank on it. Right. I would continue to move forward and make the appropriate changes that you need to make, and then, continue to keep your eye on the ball in regards to changes.
So, Kristina, every business, whether it's small or medium or large, these regulations come out and it's a nightmare sometimes. Sometimes it's not. I mean, this one is kind of for some groups, I think it's a nightmare, and for other groups, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
So if a business is going, what do I do? How can I get more information? How can they come and talk to you? What can they do to get a hold of you? How can they get information to get your blog or go check that out?
Well, our website is www.cbsks.com. You can see that I'm on there on the R team. You can email me. We can have a conversation over the phone and talk about your particular analysis. The other person that you can always refer to as well, too, if you have a legal, counsel, and you've done the analysis, you can always reach out to them. Also, employment lawyers are going to be dealing with this a great deal. I'm one of these when it comes to changes, even with Obamacare and, dealing with the Affordable Care Act. We all panicked. And a lot of it had to do with you just don't know the unknown. And then just like with any law, with the HIPAA and the COBRA and all these other acronyms that I'm bringing up, it was a lot of a trial and error for the first year to 2 years. And then people started getting into the rhythm and understanding what the law was all about. Because what will happen, Tara, and it happens every time when a law is put into place, then challenges come. It's like, okay, here's the law, and here comes challenge number 1. Here comes challenge number 2. So that's what I see with this one as well, too, is, we need to do what we need to do based upon what we know, and then we have to sit back and wait and see what happens. Well,
I'm with Kristina Dietrick with Creative Business Solutions. So one more time, Kristina, give us your website, because you do have some great blogs on there to get more information or, to think about the culture of your organization as you go through an issue like this. If you do make some significant changes or change from exempt to non-exempt, what is that going to do? I mean, I think you talk a lot about that in your blogs as well.
Yeah.
And so give us your website again and how to get a hold of you.
It is cbsks.com, or you can give us a call at 233-7860. We'd love to hear from you. And we do have this weekly blog that we can send directly to your email address. So just go out and request it online, and you'll be in the loop.
Awesome. Thanks, Kristina.
No problem.
My name is Jennifer Kermis, Vice President of Business Development with the Azura Credit Union.
TIBA is advice and support. TIBA is information and education. TIBA is a voice for small businesses.
One of the best things about it is that everyone's very open there. Everyone collaborates. Everyone talks about best practices of, well, this is how we were able to handle this situation. This may be able to help you down the road. Or this is the marketing strategy that we took on this deal versus, have you ever considered adding this product line to your business?
The Topeka Independent Business Association is strong because of its members. Become a member today by visiting topekatiba.org.
I have Greg Winkler joining me. He's the president and CEO of Azura Credit Union. So welcome, Greg.
Thank you, Tara.
It's great to have you on. And of course, we have you here because there was the recent merger of Educational Credit Union and Quest Credit Union to now create Azura Credit Union. So tell me about this merger.
Well, probably the easiest way to talk about, or the first place to start, is just the conversation started about 2 years ago with the two credit unions and management looking at each other and saying, we are so similar. We have so much commonality, same data processing system, many of the same vendors. And, we could probably do a whole lot more together than we even do separately now. And so those conversations started a little bit at the management level and then rolled up into the board level and had some of those conversations and watched those evolve over a period of months, and eventually put a plan together and took it to the membership for approval.
So what does it mean for the membership? What are the benefits or just even being a combined credit union? How does that benefit the members?
Well, it's probably a combination of things, running the gamut from, more service locations, more local branches, in a couple cases now, a couple of out-of-town branches that educational members didn't have prior. It's certainly the ability to develop additional products and services beyond what we could individually. The resources of a nearly $500 million institution are a lot different than that of a $200 million institution. And so it should give us the ability, and will give us the ability, to add some products and services. We've already done some of that with a few items, and I know we'll have the ability to do more.
Well, and speaking of kind of just the credit union portion of this, what is the value of being a credit union member versus maybe going to a bank?
Well, probably the bigger value to me, at least in my opinion, is the fact that it's a member-owned cooperative. It's credit union is not unlike any other cooperative across the country, in that it's members pooling their resources together, deposits together, to make loans to each other and to basically provide services to each other. And so it's a not-for-profit institution that allows us to keep our rates and fees and charges and terms very reasonable for the member owner, and gives us a great opportunity to serve the consumer and even small businesses. Which
makes a lot of sense for why the merge really is very effective for all the members involved, because now there's more to loan. There's more shares available and seems like more, even partnerships available to make something happen.
Yep. In today's world, I think one of the biggest struggles that financial institutions have is balancing the folks that still want to do things across the teller line, in the drive-up, in our branch, by phone, even occasionally by mail, with those that want everything on a smartphone. If today's younger generation, if you can't do it on a smartphone, they don't want to do it. They'll find another alternative that allows them to meet that need. And so that's a tough blend between that gamut, that whole spectrum from one to A to Z, from one clear through the other side, and gives us the need to try to develop both and all of that. We have to almost be all things to all people. And the size gives us some additional ability to develop technology and to deploy some things that will cover that spectrum better than we did by ourselves.
I can totally see that. That spectrum is huge. And there's even, I can see with the branding has its own level of what the security requirements and feeling that an older generation has is not the same anymore for a younger generation. They don't feel the same about having that because they have it all on their smartphone.
Right.
Where some I can see would never want to do their financials on a smartphone, ever. That would seem very unsecure. So let me ask you, because I always have to ask, whenever there's a merger or a big change, what are the challenges? What have been the biggest challenges that you guys have faced in this process?
I'd probably break those challenges down into two categories. The one, maybe even three. Probably the one for sure is the systems in place. Banking is heavily driven on a core data processing system, on software, on hardware, and on all kinds of third-party arrangements and relationships that make all that work, that drive all of that. And luckily, a huge number of our systems were already compatible. They were already nearly identical. And so to pull that together was a lot easier for us in this situation than what certainly some would be in different circumstances. Probably the second piece would be just processes, products, services. We had to take, just as an example, Educational had 4 different types of checking accounts. Quest had 4 different types of checking accounts. That creates 8 if you just pull them all together. Well, most institutions don't need 8 different. Most consumers, if they have an option of 3 or 4 that meet their needs, fit their needs, then that's going to be sufficient. And so we ended up turning that into 4. We took those 8, turned them into 4. Well, those other 4 still had members using those products, and so we had to do it. We almost did like 2 levels of merger. We did a whole bunch of changes and a whole bunch of structural and product and fee and charge amendments or adjustments on January 1st. And then we completed the rest of the merger, really pulling everything together legally and all the systems and all the processes on May 1st. Then the third item would probably be, and probably even maybe the longer lasting or the more serious item, it's the culture. Trying to create one organization out of 2. Our 2 organizations were very, very similar in philosophy and culture and focus on the member and what they mean to us as a member owner. But you still, anytime you have 2 separate organizations, no matter how similar they seem, there's still differences. And I'm guessing we'll be working through that for a number of months and a while to come. It's just reality.
Even though the positions seem like they would be the same, there's still, where am I going to land? That insecurity and giving comfort to anyone who might have like, well, there's a change. So now how do we deal with this? There's that insecurity feeling. I can imagine.
Absolutely.
That's great. So, okay, I'm going to flip that question, and I didn't tell you I was going to flip this question, but what have been some of the surprises and some of the, wow, that worked out?
I don't know. Surprises. I'd say, I don't know if it's a surprise, but I guess a pleasant surprise maybe is just how well it all went really overall. You know, we did a lot of work between Friday night on, I think, April 29th at about 8 o'clock is when we kind of totally shut down the system and handed that over to our software vendor to say, okay, you got to pull these 2 systems together now. And we had it back within about 48 hours. So we got it back late in the day, Saturday, and then turned that back on, so to speak, online, you know, with a web presence or online banking, mobile banking, et cetera, by Sunday evening late. And then, of course, opened our doors, as early as 7:30 Monday morning as Azura Credit Union, and did so able to serve members, take phone calls. We did so probably not without making some mistakes or taking a while to get some things resolved, but really, we didn't break anything. We didn't lose anybody's money. We did nothing that was serious that caused members, I think, serious heartburn, which is pretty amazing when we touched 48,000 member accounts.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
So that was, I don't know if it's a surprise. It was certainly our hope, but you all know going into those kinds of things when computers involved that things don't always go like you hope they would.
Well, that's pretty impressive. Okay, so what does the future hold?
I think the future for us, we've got to get our legs underneath us first. We've talked about that. We've still got some processes to work through, some adjustments in positions and figuring out, okay, what's a larger credit need that the smaller one didn't. Realigning some roles. We've hired a couple new folks in new roles that neither one of us could really have justified or afforded before. And we'll adjust some folks as things change going forward. But I certainly hope that it involves more locations, certainly more products and services for our member owners. I definitely believe it will include more technology because that's what people want today.
It is.
And we have the basics in place, I think, now with mobile banking and internet banking, online banking, et cetera. But that's just barely scratching the surface. And, I mentioned earlier what a young consumer wants today, and we have to be prepared to offer that or we won't remain relevant long term.
Yeah. Well, Greg, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm excited for the future of Azura. It's very exciting to see the merger and the opportunity that's ahead.
Thank you.
That was Greg Winkler, President and CEO of Azura Credit Union. So if you haven't checked them out, make sure you go and check them out. They have locations all over now because of the new merger between Educational Credit Union and Quest Credit Union. And you can learn more about them at azura.org. Thanks so much for joining me on TK Business Live. I hope you have a wonderful week.
Thanks for joining Tara and her guests on TK Business Live. Join us again next Sunday at 11:30 to hear more from our community business leaders, entrepreneurs, and people making a difference in the landscape of how business is progressively moving forward in Topeka. TK Business Live is brought to you by the members of the Topeka Independent Business Association.